My closest friend forced me into boring clothes for the ball pick. She lost her mind when the hottest guy chose me as his date. You know, there are some betrayals that just rip your world apart. Imagine believing your best friend was your biggest supporter, only to discover she'd spent years subtly tearing you down, then actively tried to destroy your shot at happiness. What she did next was so manipulative, it shook my entire world. Every year, my university would host this incredible tradition. The Marine Academy students would come to campus to pick dates for their formal ball. It was a huge deal. These uniformed Marines would march into our main courtyard and formally ask someone to be their date. My best friend, Alexis, had been obsessing over this since freshman year. For 3 years, she meticulously planned everything. What dress she'd wear, where she'd stand in the courtyard. She even practiced her surprised but elegant face in the mirror. She was convinced multiple Marines would pick her, and she'd graciously choose the best-looking one. Senior year finally arrived, and she dragged me out of bed at 5 a.m. to do her hair and makeup. She wore this stunning red dress she'd bought specifically for that day, easily a $200 investment. And me? She made me wear regular jeans and a plain shirt. Why? Because, and I quote, she didn't want us to compete for attention. Then she added with a dismissive wave that Marines never picked girls like me anyway. She actually said I was the supportive friend type, not the chosen type, and I should just be happy with that role. Ouch. We stood in the courtyard, surrounded by about 200 other girls. Alexis positioned us right in the dead center, where everyone could see her. When the Marines marched in, the entire place went silent. There were about 30 of them, all in their crisp dress uniforms, but one immediately stood out. He was leading them, straight out of a movie screen. 6'3", perfect posture, and these incredible green eyes you could spot from across the courtyard. Alexis grabbed my arm so tight, I swear she left bruises. "He's mine," she hissed before starting her practiced posing and hair-flipping routine, desperate for him to notice her. He walked straight toward us. Alexis stepped forward, her perfectly rehearsed, surprised face ready. But he walked right past her. He stopped in front of me. "Hi," he said, his voice deep and warm. "My name's Colin. Would you do me the honor of being my date to the Marine Ball?" Alexis gasped, a loud, theatrical gasp. She tried to step between us, stammering, "There must be some mistake." Colin, ever so politely, moved around her, his gaze still fixed on me, waiting. When I finally managed a shaky yes, he smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile, and handed me a formal invitation with his contact info. Alexis stood there, utterly frozen, while other Marines continued to pick dates all around us. Not a single one approached her. For the rest of the day, she didn't say a word to me. When we finally got back to our apartment, the dam broke. She exploded. She accused me of tricking him, of secretly planning this, of pretending not to care so she wouldn't suspect. She actually used the word stole, as if Colin was her property. She demanded I text Colin, tell him I couldn't go, that I was sick, had a boyfriend, anything. When I refused, she unleashed on me. "You're the worst friend in the world," she shrieked. "Plain girls like you don't deserve guys like Colin. He probably felt sorry for you, or lost a bet, and had to pick the ugliest girl he could find." She gave me the silent treatment for 2 days straight, but that didn't stop her from texting everyone we knew, painting me as a backstabbing betrayer. She claimed I'd been plotting for months, deliberately sabotaging her chances. And then she did something truly unforgivable. While I was in the shower, she took my phone. She texted Colin, pretending to be me. She told him I'd changed my mind, that I didn't want to go with him, that I'd only said yes to be polite and wasn't interested in military guys. Then she deleted the entire conversation. 3 days passed. Colin didn't text. I assumed he'd changed his mind until his roommate reached out, asking why I'd been so cruel in my rejection. My blood ran cold. That's when I discovered Alexis's calculated betrayal. I contacted Colin immediately and explained everything. He sounded so relieved. He confessed he'd actually been really excited about taking me. He told me he'd noticed me volunteering at the Campus Veterans Center for months, thought I was beautiful and kind, and had specifically come to our university hoping to ask me. My heart ached for him, for me. We made plans for the ball, but I didn't tell Alexis I'd fix things. Instead, I lied. I told her she was right, that Colin hadn't contacted me again, so I probably wouldn't go. Instantly, she perked up, acting like my friend again, smugly saying she knew he didn't really want me. The night of the Marine Ball, Alexis was in our apartment, watching movies, eating ice cream, convinced I was moping in my room. I, on the other hand, was at the ball. I was wearing a gorgeous navy dress my sister had lent me, dancing with Colin, who turned out to be funny, smart, and genuinely interested in me. The night was perfect. He was perfect. I got back around 10 a.m., still floating. My feet hurt from the heels. I had glitter in my hair, but I didn't care. I opened the door as quietly as I could. Alexis was exactly where I'd left her, on the couch in her pajamas, blanket-wrapped, watching a rom-com, eating directly from a pint of ice cream. The apartment smelled like popcorn, tissues scattered everywhere. My stomach twisted with guilt, even though I knew what she'd done was infinitely worse. She looked up. "How was your moping evening?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. My skin crawled. I clutched my small purse behind my back. It held my phone and Colin's invitation. "It was fine," I mumbled, heading straight for my room. "Just watch some stuff on my laptop." "See? I knew you'd get over him eventually," she called after me. "Guys like that don't actually go for girls like us anyway. They just do the whole formal asking thing because it's tradition." I closed my door, leaning against it, my heart pounding. The navy dress was still in my car. I'd changed in the parking lot before coming up. I sat on my bed, pulled out my phone. Colin had already texted twice, asking if I got home safe, saying he'd had an amazing time. I smiled, texted him back, then shoved the phone under my pillow when I heard Alexis moving in the living room. The next few days were so weird. I texted Colin constantly, but I had to hide it like I was doing something illegal. He wanted to see me again for dinner or just to hang out on campus, but I kept making excuses. The thought of someone mentioning the ball to Alexis made my stomach clench. We finally agreed to meet for coffee at a place 2 miles off campus, a spot mostly frequented by older folks and business workers. No students ever went there. I got there first, burying myself in a back corner booth. Colin showed up 10 minutes later in jeans and a regular shirt. He looked different, but still incredible. He slid into the booth and reached across to hold my hand. I pulled it back, scanning the room frantically. "Sorry," I whispered. "I'm just being careful." We talked for a while about nothing important. Then he got quiet, looking at me seriously. "Can I ask you something?" He stirred sugar into his coffee. "Why are we meeting 2 miles off campus like we're having an affair? I want to take you out for real dates where we don't have to hide." So I explained everything. The whole story. Alexis sabotaging me, texting from my phone. How I'd fixed it without telling her. How I'd let her think he ghosted me so she wouldn't freak out. How I'd lied about the ball, about spending the night alone. Colin listened, his coffee getting cold. "That's really messed up," he said when I finished. "What she did with your phone. That's not what friends do." "I know," I picked at a napkin. "But if I tell her now that I went to the ball and we're seeing each other, she'll lose it. She'll make my life terrible. We live together, share all the same friends." Colin was silent for a minute. "So, you're going to keep lying to her. For how long?" "I don't know," I admitted, "until I figure out what to do." He reached across the table again, and this time I let him take my hand. "I get it. Toxic friendships are hard. I had a buddy at the academy like that, always competing, always making me feel bad about myself. But here's the thing. You're letting Alexis control your life, even though she doesn't know she's doing it. You're hiding, sneaking around, and that's not fair to you or to me. Honestly, that hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I was still letting Alexis dictate my life, just like I had for 3 years. I just nodded, staring at my coffee. A week after the ball, Colin texted me. His sister, Margot, was visiting campus. He really wanted me to meet her, suggested lunch at the student union. I almost said no. The student union was central. Everyone ate there. But something about the way he asked made me agree. I met them at noon. Margot had Colin's green eyes but darker hair, and she hugged me like we'd known each other forever. We got food and sat by the windows. I kept glancing around nervously, expecting Alexis or a mutual friend to walk in. Colin says you two had a great time at the ball, Margot said, biting into her sandwich. He wouldn't shut up about you for weeks before it. Really? I looked at Colin. He shrugged, an embarrassed smile spreading across his face. I told her about volunteering at the Veterans Center, he added. He'd noticed me there months ago, apparently. Margot listened, asking about my major, my plans. She was so easy to talk to. Then she noticed me checking the entrance again. You okay? You seem nervous. I explained the Alexis situation. The whole thing, from the very beginning to that moment. Margot's expression shifted from interested to concerned, then almost angry. Let me get this straight, she said when I finished. This girl made you dress down so you wouldn't compete with her. Then, when a guy chose you anyway, she sabotaged you and has spent years making you feel like you're not good enough, and you're still protecting her feelings. When she said it like that, it sounded insane. I know it's complicated, I offered. It's not complicated, Margot cut in, putting down her fork. Real friends don't spend years making you feel less than. They don't manipulate you or tear you down. And honestly, sometimes the trash takes itself out. You just have to let it go. Colin nodded in agreement. I sat there, feeling like they'd just stated something incredibly obvious that I'd been stubbornly refusing to see. We finished lunch. As we walked out, I ran into Dominic from my dorm, with his girlfriend Sarah. They were heading into the union. Hey! Dominic grinned. You looked amazing at the ball the other night. I didn't know you and Colin were together. My stomach dropped. I could feel Colin and Margot both looking at me. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, gushing about how cute we looked dancing. Thanks, I managed, my voice thin. Can you maybe not mention it to anyone, though? It's kind of private. Dominic looked confused. Why would it be private? Everyone thought you guys looked great. Half the people there were talking about it. I'd appreciate it if you didn't bring it up, please. He shrugged. Okay, sure, whatever you want. But it's not a secret, like people were posting pictures and everything. They walked into the union, leaving me standing there, feeling sick. Colin touched my arm gently. It's going to come out eventually, he said. You know that, right? I knew. I just wasn't ready. 2 days later, I was in my biology lecture, trying to focus on cellular respiration, when my phone started buzzing in my bag. I ignored it, but it kept going, buzz, buzz, buzz. I pulled it out under the desk. 12 texts from Alexis. My hands started shaking as I opened them. The first, what the F? The second, a screenshot of an Instagram post from someone at the ball. It was a group photo, and there I was visible in the background in my navy dress, Colin's arm around my waist. Both of us smiling, tagged with both our names. The next 10 messages got progressively angrier. She asked why I lied, called me a snake, said she couldn't believe I'd betrayed her. The last one, we need to talk. Immediately. I couldn't focus for the rest of class. The professor's voice became background noise as I stared at my phone, watching the messages keep coming. By the time class ended, there were 20 texts. I walked back to the apartment slowly, taking the long way, dreading what was waiting. Alexis stood in the living room, arms crossed, face red, eyes wild. Why did you lie to me? She snarled, not even a greeting. You went to the ball. You went with Colin, and you let me think you stayed home feeling sorry for yourself. I tried to explain. I told her about finding out she'd texted him from my phone, about fixing things with him, about being scared of how she'd react. But she talked right over me before I could get 3 sentences out. You deliberately humiliated me. You snuck around behind my back and made me look stupid to everyone who knew the real story. Do you know how many people must have seen you there and then watched me talk about how Colin didn't want you? You're the one who texted him from my phone. My voice rose. You sabotaged me first, because you stole my moment. You're yelling now. You knew how much that ball meant to me. You knew I'd been planning for it for 3 years, and you just took it. I didn't take anything. I fired back. Colin chose me. That's not something you can steal. The argument raged for 20 minutes. She kept saying I'd been plotting against her, called me a snake, a fake friend. I tried to stay calm, but then I just lost it. You sabotaged me first. I screamed. You texted Colin from my phone and told him I didn't want to go. You deleted the messages, so I wouldn't know. And you've been undermining my confidence for 3 years, calling me the supportive friend type, and acting like I should be grateful you even hang out with me. Alexis went completely silent. For about 10 seconds, she just stared. Then her expression shifted, turning cold. You're delusional if you think Colin actually likes you. He probably felt sorry for the sad girl in plain clothes. Or maybe it was a dare. Pick the ugliest girl you can find. That's probably what happened. Something inside me broke, but not the way it usually did when she said things like that. This time, instead of hurt, I felt clarity. I could see the pattern so clearly. Years of little comments designed to keep me small. Years of positioning herself as the pretty one, the chosen one, while I was supposed to accept being the backup friend. I'm done, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm done listening to you tear me down. I'm done pretending this is a normal friendship. You don't treat people you care about like this. She laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You'll come crawling back. You always do. Because without me, you're nobody. I walked to my room and closed the door. I could hear her slamming things in the living room. Then my phone started buzzing. I looked. She was posting on social media. I opened Instagram, and there it was, a long, detailed thread about how I'd betrayed her, secretly going to the ball after she'd been so gracious about Colin choosing me. She made it sound like she'd been totally supportive, and I'd snuck around for no reason, carefully editing out her sabotage, making herself the victim of my cruel deception. My phone exploded with messages. Mutual friends asking what happened, people taking sides. Some believed her, some asked for my version. I sat on my bed, watching the notifications pile up, and realized she was forcing my hand. I could either publicly defend myself, or let everyone believe I was the villain in her carefully crafted story. I stared at my phone until 3 a.m. The notifications kept coming in waves. Around 4 a.m., I started typing. My hand shook. I wanted to explain everything, but without sounding cruel or defensive. I deleted entire paragraphs, rewrote them. I didn't want to destroy Alexis publicly, even though she'd tried to destroy me. Around 4 a.m., I finally had something that felt honest. I explained how she'd texted Colin from my phone while I was in the shower, deleting the conversation. I attached screenshots, the message she sent pretending to be me, and the timestamp proving I was in the shower. I wrote about how she'd spent 3 years telling me I was the supportive friend type. I kept it factual. I read it 12 times before finally hitting post at 5 a.m. Then I turned off my phone, but my brain wouldn't shut down. When I woke up 3 hours later, my phone had exploded. Some people were shocked about the text message, sabotage. Others commented that I still shouldn't have lied, that deceiving her made me just as bad. A few mutual friends said we were both being dramatic. One girl I barely knew wrote a long comment about how this whole situation was toxic. I felt sick reading it all. No matter what I said, some people would think I was the villain. My phone rang around 2 that afternoon. Colin. I almost didn't answer, embarrassed by the public mess. Are you okay? He asked. His voice sounded angry, but not at me. He'd seen everything. He couldn't believe Alexis had sabotaged me like that. He asked why I hadn't told him about all the other stuff she'd said over the years. I explained that I'd gotten so used to her comments. I didn't even recognize them as put-downs anymore. Colin was quiet for a moment. Then he told me about his own former best friend from high school, who constantly competed with him. Grades, sports, girls, even stupid stuff like push-ups. He said it took him 2 years after graduating to realize that real friends don't make you feel like you're always losing some invisible competition. We talked for over an hour about toxic friendships, about why people stay in them. He said something that really stuck with me, that sometimes we accept treatment from friends we'd never accept from a stranger because we confuse history with loyalty. I felt less alone after that call. Someone finally understood why this whole situation was so complicated. That evening, a knock on my door. I expected Alexis, but it was Liliana Gonzalez who lived next door. We'd always been friendly, but not close. She asked if she could come in. I let her. She sat on my desk chair and said she was glad I finally stood up to Alexis. I must have looked surprised because she laughed. I've been watching the dynamic between you two for 3 years, she said. Alexis treated you badly. I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to cause drama. She'd seen how Alexis always positioned herself as the pretty one, made subtle comments to keep my confidence low. She even offered to be a witness if I needed to talk to housing. I thanked her, grateful. I usually kept to myself. I never realized anyone had noticed. She hugged me before leaving. Real friends build you up instead of tearing you down. The next week was exhausting. Our mutual friend group split into factions. Some sided completely with Alexis. Others thought her text message sabotage was worse than my deception. Most just seemed tired of it all. I lost a few friends from freshman year who believed Alexis's version. But I also got closer to people like Liliana and Dominic, who told me they'd always thought something was off. Dominic pulled me aside one day, saying he'd watched Alexis manipulate situations for years and was relieved I finally saw through it. The social fallout felt like middle school drama, but it was real. It hurt. Living in the same apartment with Alexis became unbearable. We barely spoke, except when absolutely necessary. She'd make pointed comments about fake friends when I walked through the living room. She'd turn up the TV volume when I was trying to study. She'd leave her dishes in the sink for days, knowing it bothered me. I started spending most of my time at the library or Colin's place. I went to the housing coordinator. She was sympathetic. I could request a room change for spring semester, but nothing was available until then. 6 more weeks in this hostile environment. I counted down the days. 3 weeks after everything blew up, Colin invited me to a Marine Academy event. I was nervous about meeting more of his friends, worried they'd heard about the drama. But everyone was welcoming, treating me like I belonged. Colin introduced me to Declan Knight, one of his closest friends. Declan's date mentioned that Colin had talked about me for weeks before the ball, that he'd been planning how to ask me and was worried I might say no. I looked at Colin and he just smiled, squeezing my hand. Being around people who didn't know about Alexis, who just saw me as Colin's girlfriend, felt incredibly refreshing. No one was judging. They just accepted me. Declan's date also said Colin had told everyone I volunteered at the Veterans Center, and that's what first caught his attention. Hearing that made Alexis's claims that he felt sorry for me seem even more ridiculous. One morning, making coffee in the apartment kitchen, Alexis walked in. We'd been avoiding each other for 3 weeks. The sudden proximity made me tense. She stood there, then said we needed to talk like adults. Cautiously, I agreed. She said she'd been thinking, and she was sorry for texting Colin from my phone. My hope lifted for a second, until she immediately added that I still shouldn't have lied about going to the ball. She said we both made mistakes, but mine was worse because I deliberately deceive her. I realized this was as close to an apology as she was capable of giving, one that still made everything partially my fault. She couldn't just apologize without adding conditions or spreading the blame. I took a deep breath. I told her I appreciated the partial apology, but I couldn't go back to a friendship where she needed me to be less confident so she could feel better about herself. I told her her years of subtle insults about me being the supportive friend type had really damaged me, even if she didn't mean them that way. She looked genuinely surprised, like she had no idea what I was talking about. She said she was just being honest about our different social roles, that some people are naturally more outgoing and attractive, while others are better in supporting roles. She said I was being oversensitive, reading too much into normal friend observations. That confirmed everything. She fundamentally didn't understand how her words had affected me, and probably never would. We reached an agreement, civil roommates for the remaining weeks. No more pointed comments. No more social media drama. Just polite coexistence until housing changes happened in January. It wasn't friendship, and it wasn't the closure some people expected, but it was livable. I felt relieved to have clear boundaries, even if it wasn't the reconciliation everyone thought we should have. Some mutual friends seemed disappointed that we didn't hug and make up, but I was done pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Finals week came and went. I got approval for a room change to a single for spring semester. I packed up my stuff the day after my last exam, moving everything to my parents' house for winter break. My sister picked me up. On the drive home, she asked how I was doing. I told her everything. She was quiet for a while, then said she was proud of me for standing up for myself. She said watching me accept Alexis's treatment for 3 years had been hard, but she knew I had to figure it out on my own. My parents were supportive when I got home, even though they'd always liked Alexis. My mom said sometimes friendships run their course, and that's okay. My dad asked if I was sure I'd tried everything to fix it. I explained that you can't fix a friendship where one person needs the other to stay small. They both hugged me and said they understood. Their support felt incredibly validating. Winter break arrived with the quiet relief of distance and space. Colin and I started video calls every few days. Those conversations felt different from any friendship I'd had before. He'd ask about my day and actually listen without redirecting the conversation back to himself. When I mentioned feeling nervous about a family dinner, he didn't tell me I was overreacting. He just said my feelings made sense and asked what would help. I finally noticed how different this was from years of Alexis dismissing my concerns or turning them into opportunities to talk about her own problems. One night, on a call, I mentioned missing the Campus Veterans Center where we'd first crossed paths. Colin smiled. He said he'd been hoping I'd bring that up. He confessed he'd visited 3 times before the ball selection, timing it so he could see me interact with the older vets. He'd been working up the courage to introduce himself for weeks. Hearing that made something shift in my chest. Alexis had spent years convincing me that guys like Colin didn't notice girls like me unless they felt sorry for us. But Colin had noticed me specifically because of my character and kindness, not despite some imagined flaw. We made plans for spring semester, study dates, weekend trips. I realized I was building something real with someone who genuinely wanted me to succeed and feel confident. My sister walked into my room one afternoon, caught me smiling at my phone during a text conversation with Colin. She sat on my bed and said she was glad I'd finally found someone who treated me the way I deserved. That validation from her meant everything. She'd watched the Alexis friendship damage my self-worth for 3 years. Spring semester started with me moving into my single room in a different building. The freedom of that space felt incredible. I could decorate however I wanted without worrying about Alexis's opinions. I could study without her pointed comments about how some people had to work harder than others. I could just exist without constantly monitoring whether I was being too confident or too successful or too anything. 3 weeks into the semester, I was grabbing lunch in the dining hall when I saw Alexis. She was at a table across the room with some girls from her communications class. Our eyes met for a brief second. We both nodded politely, then looked away. No dramatic confrontation. No tears or apologies or attempts to rehash everything. Just two people who used to share everything and now shared nothing. I sat with Liliana and Declan, who had become real friends over the past few months. People who celebrated my successes instead of finding ways to diminish them. Colin joined us a few minutes later, kissed my cheek before sitting down. I caught Alexis watching us from across the room, an expression I couldn't quite read. I turned back to my friends, focusing on the conversation at my table, instead of worrying about what she thought. Sometimes I still feel sad about losing what I thought Alexis and I had, but mostly I feel relieved. Relieved to be free of constantly feeling like I wasn't enough. Have you ever had a friendship like this? One where you just knew, deep down, you deserved better? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.